This is a topic that you and I have been talking a lot about lately. I know you've been working with a lot of our clients on lately. And so, a little bit about where this information is coming from, what we do, who we do it for, and then we'll dig into your unique value, why it's important in your executive job search, where it can show up in your job search, and then finally how to create it. We also have a worksheet on how to create it if anyone wants to get wild and crazy at home, kind of doing this in a like guided activity. So if you want the workshop the worksheet, pop in the chat worksheet and I'll make sure you get a copy. So DNS Executive Career Management is a firm that works with senior leaders, typically VP, C-level, and board level leaders, to prepare for and navigate the high level job search. So we are not a search firm. We do not do placements. But instead, we're like the home stagers to make a luxury property look expensive before it goes on the market, right? We're working with candidates to define that unique value, to build executive resumes, to develop a strong LinkedIn and executive online digital presence, right? It's the job search strategy. How are you going to market? How are you finding opportunities? Interview prep so that you're showing up strong in every stage of an interview process. And then finally, compensation negotiation at the end, right? Making sure you're maximizing that final offer, not leaving money on the table, and getting the benefits and security that you need in that final offer. So if you're interested in learning any more about what we do, reach out to Carmen Poff on our team. And as we get started, if everyone could pop in the chat where you're joining us from, I'd love to know where everyone's at. That'll be really helpful. And I know I'm in Portland, Maine. And Lesley, where are you?
I am in sunny Miami, Florida.
Yes, we're having very different weather today, I think.
Come on down.
Yep, it's snow raining here right now. So
I won't tell you what it is. I want to keep the love flowing.
Right, yeah, exactly. Very jealous. Oh my goodness. So let's talk a little bit about why a unique value proposition is important. And then Lesley's going to take over and talk about what this can look like in your own search and what it is and how it works. And so the unique value is important because most of our clients have built an amazing career through their network, getting promoted, getting recruited, and then you find yourself at this place in your career where you have to take yourself to market at this level for the first time. And what does this look like? And before, you had been competing against everyone who was earlier in their career. There was a lot more opportunities. Companies had a lot more spaces for mid and early career roles. But now you're competing against the absolute best in your industry for the fewest roles, right? There's one chief marketing officer at a company or one CTO, and the competition is incredibly high. So unfortunately, being a seasoned leader with 20 years of experience in the IT industry or whatever it is not enough. That is table stakes. So what we want to think about is how we show up differently and where our unique value is in the market so that we stand out against all the other A-plus players that we're competing against. So Lesley, talk a little bit about what this is and how you can think about using it in your job search.
Absolutely. Thanks, Deborah. So I'm going to talk with you all about what unique value is. A unique value proposition isn't just an elevator pitch. It encompasses what sets you apart in terms of experience, expertise, and the tangible results that you can deliver. And it can be weaved into many areas of your resume and LinkedIn profile. So I'll jump into a couple sections of the resume where you can incorporate the unique value proposition, or UVP, otherwise known as UVP. And I'll mention a client example for more clarity as well. So first, starting with the executive summary or profile, that is normally at the top of your resume under the headliner section with contact information. It's about 3 to 5 sentences and is normally a high-level overview of your career, key achievements, your leadership style, and what you bring to the table. So this section should position you as a results-oriented leader and set the tone for the rest of your resume. And here you do want to focus, and you can incorporate your unique value proposition. Again, what sets you apart in terms of your experience and expertise. As a tip, you don't want this section to seem generic or sound like a boilerplate. You know what I'm talking about. Boilerplate resume template. And I'll give an example about a client that I worked with. I'll call her Andrea Smith just for private reasons. And Andrea was a chief medical officer, but she was unique in several areas, and her experience extended beyond just clinical development. She was truly a growth agent with strong business acumen, transforming various businesses. So instead of an opening paragraph sentence such as, for example, results oriented medical executive with extensive experience transforming businesses, that's not bad, but contrast that with this. Transformative executive and growth driver, experience in every aspect of the healthcare sector for over 20 years, from startup to Fortune 50 operations, and from fee for service to value based care models. Recognized for catapulting expansion of a disease management company 1,400% across 37 states, doubling EBITDA in 1 year, and growing practices and organizations from ground up to number one market leader. Okay, so
Love that.
yeah, it's
It's so much stronger. And I'd like to kind of push on something you said about, that first paragraph needing to really set you apart. You don't want that first line to be, could it be anyone else in your industry, right? Could you just plug anyone else in that and be the same? And results oriented growth driver could be a lot of people, right? But what you just laid out was so hyper specific.
absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. It's specific. It's showing, not telling. I know that's something you mentioned
Yes,
a lot, Deborah.
it
Um,
is so true.
it's important to show and not just tell, as Deborah mentioned, instead of saying results oriented, which could be essentially anybody.
Right.
Showing by giving those stats about an example of Andrea growing the company 1,400% across 37 states and doubling the EBITDA in 1 year. That's really showing the results.
Right.
So you're like, okay, this is how she drives those results, not just saying, oh, I'm results oriented, but by giving that proof. And
So true.
so yes, and the fact that she also Andrea did beyond what just the typical chief medical officer did do in her role. As for some context for those that are tuning in, this client was applying for CEO roles that value these transformative and business development or growth aspects. And this cues me in to remind you all to keep this in mind, the statement in mind that Michelle Merritt, our chief strategy officer, says often, which is the resume is about you, not for you.
Mm,
So in
so
addition
true.
to weaving in your unique value, it should set you apart in general while highlighting strengths that align with the particular roles and organizational needs that you're targeting, just as a
Mhm.
reminder. I'll quickly go into the core competency sections, unless you want to give any more input, Deborah, on anything.
Oh, well, I just was gonna kind of double down on, I love your point about you have to be specific to that job you're looking for, right? And I think that's so important when we think about that unique value. We'll talk a little bit more about it at the end, but you're thinking about it really starts with having a clear focus of the kind of company that you want to work with, the kind of function that you want to do, all of these things, so that you can really speak directly to that audience. Because right now, people and companies aren't hiring generalists, they're hiring specialists to really solve their problem. And what does that look like? So you're absolutely right of really thinking about getting clear on that focus.
Absolutely. Thanks for that input too. And I like what you say about, and it's true that companies are hiring more specialists nowadays. So anything that you can really target your specific expertise, really show that. Absolutely. So that's a great point as well. And so, moving into another section where you can incorporate your unique value is the core competencies and key skills section, which is a bullet point list, normally of 7 to 15 bullets, usually highlighting your most relevant skills, expertise, and areas of proficiency. And of course, as mentioned, you want to target and mention those skills within the job descriptions that appeal to you, so you can incorporate keywords from job descriptions of interest to optimize for applicant tracking systems. And then weave in skills that really reinforce your UVP and unique value. For example, two of Andrea's skills in her skills section were startup to enterprise leadership and growth strategy, as they relate to her unique value.
Yeah.
Um, yes. And then kind of moving into the professional experience section, this is the part of the resume for executive resumes that will focus on the last 10 to 15 years of experience, sometimes can extend a little bit further back, to no more than 20 years. Board resumes, though, can go further back in career history. And in that section, you'll have the company name, company description, dates of employment, and job title. You can also mention, it's also important to mention some of the function and responsibilities of your role in a few sentences. And then there's a key achievements area
Yeah.
within that professional experience section. And this area is key. Here you'll have bullet points summarizing your contributions, and you can focus on measurable outcomes, again, showing, not telling. So if you can
Yeah.
revenue growth, cost savings, market expansion, and the key achievement bullets, you can emphasize accomplishments that align with your unique value. For example, one of Andrea's key achievement bullets mentioned that she scaled company A to 1.5 million in revenue and number one market leader in advanced wound treatment in Cincinnati. So this again ties back to her unique value that she adds as a transformative growth agent driving companies from ground up to market leaders. And so you can really, and these are some examples of the main sections that you can incorporate your unique value proposition within the resume. LinkedIn, very similarly, especially in the headline and about section.
Mm,
For
so
example,
important.
yes, absolutely. Like headliner is key because
Yes.
right up in front and center. And
Yeah.
so a headliner for Andrea could be healthcare transformation executive with a divider, growth catalyst from startup to Fortune 50 operations, driving companies from ground up to market leaders as an example. So I hope
Yeah.
this was helpful in giving you all some tips about how to incorporate your unique value within parts of the resume as well as LinkedIn. And now I'll hand it back to Deborah, who will discuss a little bit more on how one can create a unique value proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to make sure I'm understanding and everyone else on the call is understanding what you're saying here. So it sounds like the unique value proposition isn't just something that's like the headline of your resume or the summary section. It's really woven throughout all the sections and all the content, right?
It
It's something
is.
that you're really kind of, it's not necessarily a static paragraph like we think of an elevator pitch. It's really kind of, it's guiding the information that we're including throughout the resume.
It very much is, as you mentioned, not just like you said, that static, but just kind of putting it up front and center, but also like, oh, reminder, I'm a growth agent. Oh, and the skills reminder. So it'll kind of peep in and out throughout these various parts of the resume and or other, whether cover letter or even LinkedIn profile, to kind of remind that hiring manager why you really stand out and why they want you as opposed to someone else.
That's so important. And it's also helpful when you're thinking about the information you're including in a resume. And most of our clients, as you know, because you do this for everyone, have a lot of rich background. They've got a lot of accomplishments. There's a lot you can include in that resume. Where do you know what to cut? And I think if you have a clear focus on where your value is, then you know what we're going to pull back out.
Absolutely. Totally key. Your value, as well as, again, what those roles are looking for as well. Kind of a combination of figuring out, okay, what do I weed out based on what I want to put front and center, as you mentioned, Deborah, as your value, but also like weeding out things that aren't pertinent to the job role as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Well, so this is great. So as we talk about where to use the unique value proposition, things like that, then let's talk about how to create one. And I know I said at the top of the call, but anyone who's just joining us, we do have a worksheet we've created on this. Don't know if you can see it very well, but if anyone wants to dig into this in an activity on your own, pop in the chat or send us a DM, asking for the worksheet, and we'll be happy to send it to you. And that way you can either print it or do it on your own. But you want to think about a few things. There's a guided activity to get to that standout unique value proposition, right? And it's really going to start, and I know we talked about it, but it is so incredibly important, is starting with your ideal next role. And it's important because not only does it help you set a very clear and an effective unique value proposition, but it also helps you then think through your networking strategy, your go-to-market strategy for trying to find opportunities, your interview prep strategy. All of these things really start with understanding your audience. So you want to think about, what is your ideal target industry? What about company size? Ownership structure, PE owned, VC backed, public, private, family office. What does that look like? Because the needs are different for every organization, right? And then what kind of function do you want to do at that company? What are the areas you're going to lead? And you don't necessarily need to think about title because it may change in different companies, but what are the areas where you'd like to be, in a leadership role for? And then who's the decision maker for this kind of a role, right? Who would you report to? Who's hiring for this role? And you want to think about who that person is in terms of title or function in the company. And getting really clear on that is so incredibly important, because then the next step is identifying the key challenges that are facing that industry, those kinds of companies, that size of company in the market, those that decision maker, right? What is keeping them up at night? What are they responsible for? What is the board mandated that they deliver on, right? That you can help them deliver on in your role. And then your functional peers, what are their biggest challenges right now? Understand what those deep challenges are in the market. And then the next thing is identifying how you are uniquely equipped to solve for those challenges. Because again, as we said in the beginning, it's not enough to say, I've got 20 years of experience in marketing for the SaaS industry, right? Nobody cares. How are you uniquely equipped to solve the challenges that companies are facing today? And what's happening? And how can you come in and really turn things around, or take things to the next level, or whatever it may be, right? Navigate these industry changes and challenges that are going on. And then finally, to put it all together, then you want to build a unique value proposition that's stating kind of, you are a what you do, who, what you deliver, and then for XYZ kind of company, right? So we want to navigate who you are, what you deliver, who you do it for in a short, couple of sentences. And again, I don't want you all to get really bogged down into exactly what these sentences say in the exact words, and and agonize over syntax and all of this stuff, right? When I see a lot of people get really bogged down into the details on this, again, this is not an elevator pitch you're going to read word for word. This is going to guide your unique value that you weave throughout the entire resume, the entire LinkedIn profile, things like that, through the whole process. So that's where you want to think about the the general unique value, and not necessarily a very strict, rigid sentence.
Yes, I love that. I see a lot of people are requesting the worksheet as well, so
Oh,
definitely.
perfect. Yeah, happy
Yeah.
to share it. It'll be helpful. We did this recently live at an event in New York last week or so, and and it's a hard project to do, right? And that's why we developed the worksheet, because it takes a while, and especially, it depends on where you're at in your search, right? Sometimes people come to us and they say, I know exactly what kind of role I want. Okay, great. Then we can hop straight into the challenges and then putting it all together. But sometimes that, what kind of a role do I want, is a much bigger conversation. And it takes some soul searching. And I joked in the live event that we did this, sometimes it sparks some existential crises, right? And we don't want to necessarily do that. So it can take a while to develop this. This is something, honestly, if you're struggling with what you want to do next, or what that ideal next role looks like, we can help with that too. Our director of coaching, Norma Davila, can help with building out, your career management strategy. What do you want to do next? What's next in your career? To then build the unique value, right? Because it's very hard to do the resume, LinkedIn profile, job search strategy, networking strategy, interview prep without knowing what that ideal thing is.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to know a little bit about how you can weave the unique value into your networking strategy and into conversations with people, Lesley.
Yes, I think that's great. I think one of the things too is it's obviously, as we all know, it's great to network and really get our faces out there and go to these events. And having in mind when you're speaking with someone at a networking event, what sets you apart, lead with that. So if someone says, well, what do you do? I'm keeping in mind our client,
Yeah.
the chief medical officer. She could say I'm a CMO, but what I really focus specifically on is transforming businesses, and then give one or two examples in a natural conversation and flowing way. So she just gets to the gist of I'm a CMO. However, basically I do
Right.
above and beyond, and goes into those examples of being transformative. And it doesn't have to be long, but just kind of really getting into the crux of someone else. Oh, what do you do? Like, this is what I do, but always keeping in mind, like, what do I do that's outside of my field, beyond my field? And then just, but what's maybe unique or what I do that's different in this space is. So
Right.
just putting it out there. And I feel like if someone presents it like that to me, if someone were talking like that to me, it would really stick out. Oh, wow, this is something that's really different about this person. They're not just a normal chief medical officer or whatever it is. They're not just the chief marketing officer, the typical, this is what stands them apart. So just keeping that in mind in brief and succinct and
Yes.
natural way. And then likely they'll be interested in ask more questions anyway.
Exactly. I love your point. Brief and succinct is so incredibly important in the networking process. I don't know about you all, but we get a ton of people reaching out to us about their job search. And when I open that first LinkedIn message, it'll, hi, I'm looking for a new role in XYZ. Here's my background. And then I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling, and they're still like describing their background. It's too much, right? People aren't going to read all that information, especially in a first level reach out, right? And so keeping it succinct and then inviting questions is such a powerful way to do that. And I actually met, it's so funny, also a chief medical officer. We do work in all industries, friends.
Yes.
But at an event recently, and she and I, we're having a conversation. What do you do? And she said, I'm chief medical officer, but I work with early stage companies that are looking to launch into international markets.
Hmm. Wow.
So specific, right? And it was really helpful. She works in biotech, right? So it was really interesting to see how she narrowed it down into not just chief medical officer, but also here's what this looks like.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's very powerful.
Yeah. And there was a question in the chat. It looks like, how do you feel about, what was it? Having 20 years of experience in the summary. It's something that we don't typically include unless it matters to that industry, right? And that's where it comes back to knowing your ideal role, right? So with this example Lesley gave, she included the number of years, but further down, it wasn't leading with, right? She went through all the value first, then included the number of years because number of years was important in that industry. There are some industries you wouldn't include number of years, and that's fine too, that you don't want to, age out of opportunities and things like that for a career role. Now with board resumes, you can add number of years because people are expecting a deep history. And so you're not really going to get aged out for most opportunities in board roles. But that's a great question.
That is a great question. I'd like to add to that too, and what Deborah was mentioning, which is absolutely accurate in terms of it's not always necessary. In fact, sometimes not at all to mention in the professional summary or executive summary up top your amount of years of experience, because they will likely see that you've had X amount, even if it's the top 15, that
Right.
you include in your experience section. However, for that particular role for Andrea, it was important. However, there are also to add, there are some tips and tricks. Let's say that you've had experience that goes more than 15 years back or 17 years back, between 17 and 20, but you don't necessarily want to, as I think who was asking that, Veronica Scarano, you don't want to like age yourself out. There is this a part on the resume where, let's say you have super relevant experience more than 15 years back, but you don't want to put the exact dates. You can always say previous roles include, and then list the title, list the company name, and if there is relevant experience, just maybe a sentence or two with some relevant experience that may even correlate to the role you're applying to without putting the date. So that's a crafty way of also saying previous experience includes if it's getting farther back to that
Yeah.
10 and 15 years, while showing your relevant experience without the actual dates to kind of age you further. So just that's an additional tip.
I love that. It's so important to have that early career experience section. And then you don't have to include everything. They're not including dates. So there's no holes, right?
Yeah.
And so adding that shows, that you can just list the companies and the titles that you want to show. I mean, you don't want to look like you hatched out of an egg as a chief medical officer, right? 15 years ago, but you also don't want to put so much information back that you're either, you're doing the math and going, wow, she's been in the career 35 years, right? So, so that early career section can be so incredibly helpful. And then be mindful where you are adding dates. Our director of client success, Carmen, who is who you would talk to if you're interested in learning more about working with us and your career strategy.
And she's amazing.
And she's amazing, exactly. And she's also in Portland, Maine, so maybe send her some vitamin D and some sunshine.
Yes.
We haven't seen the sun in weeks, but Not that I'm upset about it or anything. But anyway, she received a resume from a potential client the other day that had experience going back to 1984. And not only was the experience aging her, but it was also irrelevant for what she was looking for. And so it was detracting from her unique value. It was putting up a red flag. And when you're dealing with hiring managers or HR leaders or recruiters who are younger than that, I mean, then you can see a date like that, and it from their perspective can seem, it can be aging out of opportunities. I was joking, but not untrue, that my parents were married in 1984, right? Like, it's been a while, and so we want to think about, what are we adding to our resume that is telling that story of our unique value and not detracting from the value that we bring.
Absolutely.
So, a couple of things as we wrap up. I would love to know in the chat, what tip was meant for you today. What tip are you going to be able to take away and immediately add to your own unique value, or be able to help you with your job search? If anyone wants to see some specific examples of how Lesley has done this in other resumes, we do have a video on our YouTube channel where we did this presentation in a longer format, where we did some screen shares and she physically showed how she weaves unique value in. So please go to our YouTube channel. You can see that. And fun announcement, we are moving our LinkedIn Lives to a weekly format instead of bi-weekly, so that we can bring more guests on and more amazing team members like Lesley, who can share these tips with all of you. So we're really excited. Starting next week, we will be weekly. Really looking forward to it. And if anyone is interested in learning about how to work with us, what our work looks like, how we can support you through your job search journey, reach out to Carmen Poff on our team and schedule a call.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. It was so good to see you all. And thank you, Lesley, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here.